The U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is striking an upbeat note, this after wrapping up talks in North Korea. Now, he described his meetings as productive and spoke about a great deal of progress. But that's not what Pyongyang is saying. Our Stephen D'Souza is in New York following the negotiations for us today. So Mike Pompeo, as we said, an upbeat note, Steve. But what is North Korea saying, almost in contrast?
That's right. We appear to be getting mixed messages as to the results and just the very nature of these talks. Mike Pompeo made those comments, and then a couple of hours after he left, the North Korean Foreign Ministry released a statement calling the attitude of the American negotiators regrettable, saying that they came in asking for unilateral nuclear disarmament, which they called extremely worrisome. They said that this was essentially a cancerous demand made by previous administrations that ultimately was a roadblock to talks. And so many experts had said that the North Koreans often would go back on their word if they promised denuclearization, and perhaps this is what we're seeing now. But Mike Pompeo, as you mentioned off the top, putting a very positive spin on things, saying that talks were in fact productive and that they did accomplish what they set out to do in these talks, because they said this is just one step in a very long process. Let's hear from Mike Pompeo earlier today.
We had many hours of productive conversations. These are complicated issues, but we made progress on almost all of the central issues. Some places a great deal of progress, other places there's still more work to be done. So a very productive conversation about the process by which we will deliver on the commitments that were made in the Singapore summit.
So the key word seems to be productive there, Steve, and a lot is riding on this because the White House has said that an agreement will be reached.
That's right. You know, remember last month's summit in Singapore, the president came away with a very vague promise from the North Koreans, which he stated would mean complete nuclear disarmament, denuclearization, and even Secretary Pompeo saying that in that vague statement was the promise, but it wasn't clear that that was what North Korea had ever actually promised to do. And so we have a lot of experts saying that no, North Korea never really promised that, and the devil was going to be in the details. But even as recently as Thursday of this week, the president seemed very confident selling this deal as something that was essentially done. Take a listen to what the president had to say earlier.
And yet, it was a very smart deal for North Korea. Goodwill is very important. But we signed a wonderful paper saying they're going to denuclearize their whole thing. It's going to all happen.
Now, a lot of experts have pointed out that even the vague promise that was made at the Singapore summit wasn't as strong as previous promises that the North Koreans had gone back on. And so the question is just what exactly does denuclearization look like? There's been a term thrown around which relates to complete, verifiable, and irreversible, but it's not clear that that's exactly what North Korea is looking to do, even as U.S. intelligence and recent satellite images appear to show that North Korea is continuing along with its missile programs and other parts of its nuclear program. And so at the end of the talks today, Mike Pompeo saying that they are scheduled to meet again on July 12th around there to discuss another major issue, which is the repatriation of American soldiers who were killed during the Korean War. So still a lot left to happen, but it remains to be seen if the U.S. will continue to declare victory in this, even though the details are still quite murky.